Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of House of League. I'm James Smailes. I'm joined once again by our All Out Rugby League editor, Matt Shaw. Matt, you well?
No, I'm very much under the weather.
Good start.
Magic Weekend Lurgy
Magic
is a thing
that you've just created.
that I have created. Absolutely nothing to do with staying out far too late Friday and Saturday night.
No.
I feel rotten though. I feel really bad.
Yeah, you're getting your just desserts. Also with us, Josh McAllister, back on the sofa after a week off. Did you go somewhere?
I've only mentioned it a few times, especially in the media bench. I had a lovely few days in Rome. It was great. And then made sure I was back in time for a weekend in Newcastle.
And can I just... there's so many things to tell you about Josh this week.
I was a little bit worried that anything I do will just get brought up on this podcast.
Well, he somehow found a way for it to take 5 hours to get from Halifax to Newcastle.
Yes. While some of us were working all day Friday, you guys were just playing Guess the Song in the car.
He forgot,
literally.
The first roundabout we encountered, he forgot that you give way to the right before you gave way to the left and just shot out.
Him and Ben were being very dramatic.
Ben from Love Rugby. No, we weren't. He even apologised. We went, no, there's nothing wrong with that. And then we're in the car park, weren't we? Decided to park as far away as he could from the entrance and still hit a curb, try to drive into the spot.
I tapped it.
Did you hit the curb?
Yes.
So Josh can't drive, is basically what we're saying.
There's many more
Drew
stories.
as well. Drew now at Wigan Today always has that joke as well, but there's nothing.
There's many more stories we could tell from the weekend, but we will not. With it being a family podcast as well.
I will say it was great to sort of see and meet so many listeners of the show in Newcastle. I think Matt even had a selfie in Pop World at one point.
I did get asked for a selfie in Pop World, but Smailes' ego has been through the roof all weekend because he's like, everyone I speak to just says they listen to the podcast, and what he doesn't realise, they don't listen to it for him, but you think that, so that's fine.
No. Nobody's watching or listening to this for me. I'm fully aware of that. But as the person that, that orchestrates this madness, I'm just delighted that it's doing so well and that you two, are finally getting that attention that your ego's desperately
I'm just surprised that our numbers aren't higher than what they are, because if everyone who claims they listen to the podcast did, we would get more viewers than we actually do.
We'd be getting more than Coronation Street, the amount of people listening to have.
Well, Matt was walking around Fan Village on the Saturday, waving and shaking hands with everyone. Nice to meet you. And he was recognised. He loved it. Loved the fame.
He was recognised because he was walking around wearing a sandwich board saying, "Hi, I'm Matt Shaw from All Out Rugby League. Please come up and take a photo of me." Let's move on. Let's talk about Magic Weekend, first of all, as we've got to. I was a bit underwhelmed, if I'm honest with you. For me, record crowds on the Sunday and all that, great. But let's just talk about it as the weekend as a whole. It was a bit meh. I don't know if that was just me, but I wasn't blown away by the quality that we saw. I don't think we've seen some of the best games that we've seen at Magic in the past. Some teams won without even playing well at all, which is not really what you want to see. I don't know. I wasn't blown away by it without being too negative and doing it down. I wasn't blown away.
Try and keep a balanced perspective on it, because for all intents and purposes, we are there to work, and it's a long working weekend when you try to cover 6 games and you can get a bit fatigued and a bit... I went and watched a bit of the Huddersfield Hull FC game in the stands, and not the press bench, in the actual stands, and the atmosphere was great. And everyone seemed to be loving it. I didn't think it was the best game. I agree with you. I don't think much will live in the memory rugby-wise from the weekend, barring the Caius Fertilli wonder try, which will firmly go in that Magic Weekend highlight reel of all time. But yeah, I think it was a bit unfortunate with the scheduling, because Lee Callahan was actually a good game one.
Yes, I thought we got off to a good start.
But then we know that Catalans don't bring too many, so there weren't many in the ground for that. And then not many people stay for all 3 games, because it's a big ask, and no one then was going to stay for Hull KR Salford, because it was what we all expected it to be, a complete non-starter of a game. So the first 2, for the 2/3 of Saturday, it felt a bit empty. It was pretty good for the Saints Leeds game.
Yeah.
Sunday was better generally in terms of people in the ground, but I'm with you that the rugby it was a great weekend, but the rugby was probably the disappointment.
A positive though, in terms of, excuse me, my phone's going off there.
Proper professionalism there.
I know.
That's two. That's both of you.
Well, I mean, I had it on silent, to be honest, but still. A positive that the crowd was up. A positive that we were back in Newcastle. It's a great venue. I think everybody likes it. The stack outside is a terrific addition, although one that I think was underused by the RFL.
He won't mind me saying this. I told Rodri Jones at RL Commercial they absolutely need to use that next year to their advantage.
Yes.
I think the fan
like
park...
Vegas.
100%. The fan park they've got just outside the ground, family friendly, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You could do something a bit more adult based, a bit more for the grown-ups in there, and make that a real thing. There's a real opportunity there moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you speaking to Rodri. I followed it up, speaking to him and Andy Wilson, who deals with the press at it. I felt by saying that I volunteered us to do a live show of the podcast. The Friday night before the game started on the Saturday. I said we'd do it for a small fortune, but I said we'd do it to help them out. And it seemed to get shrugged off. I don't know why, but the stack was underused. Hopefully they do make more of that. It's great. We're going to be back in Newcastle next year. I mean, that's a given. I think
it was never.
I think we all knew that before we even went at the weekend.
There's Newcastle Council have been trying to get it locked in as a long-term thing for a while. So there was no real threat of it ever moving.
No. I think the Newcastle Football Club owners see the value in it now. Certainly because they've got the stack, they own that. So the money that's generating helps them with PSR. It's effectively like having 2 extra home games in terms of people through there, and with the Friday night and the bank holiday Monday, which is why I think we go back on another bank holiday. I think that's probably nailed in now.
Newcastle just feels like it's home, but I would still like to see it moved about maybe every 3 or 4 years. I'd like to see it
for
Newcastle.
1 year.
Yes, Newcastle 3 years, somewhere new for one. Just to add a little bit different.
I thought your suggestion on the Facebook Live we did was good. 2 years at Newcastle, 1 year somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then
just to keep it lively.
Gives you that appetite to then go back after a couple of years. I thought that was a good idea.
It's got to be somewhere ambitious, somewhere a little bit different. I know Ellen Road last year, we had to do that. It wasn't great, was it? So somewhere a little bit ambitious every 3 years.
Let's talk about what was the big talking point of Magic Weekend, and as good as that Castleford Tigers try was, that wasn't the big talking point. It was what happened afterwards, but also during that St Helens game against Leeds Rams with the booing of not just Paul Wellens, but some of the players. I think probably mainly Tristan Saylor, that fair to say.
I didn't hear it.
No, well, we didn't where we were in the press area, did we? But we were made aware that it was happening. I think we were all in. Were you in Paul Wellens? I was in Paul Wellens' press conference. I think Josh was in Paul Wellens.
I was in the mix zone.
Yeah, you were in the mix zone, which we'll come to. Yeah. And he looked frustrated. I mean, I don't want to say things that he wasn't, but to me, I got the sense he was agitated by what had gone on, but was still very respectful. Didn't call anybody out and said, look, if people want to say what they want to say, they can, but it looked like it had got to him.
What happened pitch side was completely unacceptable.
Yes. Tell people that maybe didn't see the game or went to toilet or to get a brew or to get a beer as soon as the match finished and will have missed that. Because we don't know what Sky picked up either, because we weren't watching. We were there in...
He was basically getting hammered on pitch side by supporters. I couldn't hear the ins and outs of what was said, but I'm told by people closer to it, it crossed the line too far. And then it clearly bothered a few people, including Jack Wellsby. Most of the players went and applauded the fans behind the sticks.
Yep.
Jack Wellsby didn't. I saw him having a discussion with Paul Wellens. This was pretty soon after.
Quite animated discussion.
Very animated. As well. And I could see Paul, and Paul was saying, go applaud the fans. And basically Jack clapped twice, couldn't see what he was saying because he was looking at Paul, so his head was behind me, and walked down the tunnel, very clearly frustrated and annoyed with what was going on. And then obviously that was why I'd gotten to the mix zone, because there was only I wanted to speak to him,
and you did speak to him. He came out. It was one of our most read stories of the weekend. He was very critical of that section.
Yeah.
We're not saying it's everybody, but that section of Saints fans that were booing. He was very critical. Just again, give people a flavour of the sort of things that he was saying.
Well, in a nutshell, he said he wasn't willing to go and applaud them because when they'd been behind the sticks after conceding a try, some of the abuse, and he called it abuse of certain people, was too far, and he wasn't willing to cop it. I have sympathy with him. I can see both sides of the argument. You know, you should always go and applaud the fans, and you can't paint them all with the same brush.
No.
But I do think some of the abuse that Paul Wellens has got in particular has been way over the top. And I would say abuse. There's nothing wrong with criticism, Smailes.
No.
But there are far too many people who don't know the difference between criticism and abuse. And I don't want to make this all about the fans, because I can understand why the fans are frustrated. They haven't won since the World Club Challenge, they've not won anything. They've not played well. There's no getting away from the fact they're not playing well.
Since the World Club Challenge, they've not played well.
By and large. So you can understand it. But you would also think a club legend like Paul Wellens and a team that's still the crux of arguably the greatest ever side St Helens have had. You know, you've still got Wellsby, Walmsley, Lomax, a couple of others in there, Knowles, Lees, who you would think there'd be a little bit more.
Is that not half the problem, though, that it's still that team 3 years on, 4 years on, 5 years, 6 years on from when that dynasty started?
My point is, you would think there'd be a bit more understanding and a little bit more support shown to a group of players that have been incredibly loyal and delivered so much success. And before that, Paul Wellens is one of the club's greatest ever players. And the manner in which they're being spoken about and to from certain quarters is over the line. So you can understand why there is that disconnect at the minute.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody at the club that cares about the club more than Paul Wellens. I think that's pretty clear. And as Wellsby said when he's speaking to you, Matt, you're talking about a Harry Sunderland winner, you're talking about a Lance Todd trophy winner, you're talking about a Man of Steel winner, you're talking about someone that's won every single trophy for this club and loves the club with all his heart. It'll be ripping him apart to get that sort of abuse from people that are wearing a St Helens shirt. And you can see why Wellsby's upset and the players are upset. These are people as well that he's not just the coach, he's a former teammate of a lot of them and friend as well. You know, it'll be tearing them apart as well.
Absolutely. I just wanted to go back to your point on it being the same players. I do think Paul Wellens was handed an almost difficult task, because we are expecting the players 5-6 years older now to play the same as they did back then when they were at their top form. The players, you know, you hit your peak and then you're a little bit, well, your peak could be end 20s, and in the 30s you start to, you know, slow down a little bit. I do think he was given a difficult task there, and we all expect the same heights, and maybe parts of the recruitment haven't been quite right so far. And then even in the game, Johnny Lomax was named on the bench. I'm not quite sure what the plan was there. But yeah, I do feel sorry for Paul Wellens and everyone involved. A
fair criticism of Paul Wellens is that he can't find the spine to work. And, you know, whenever a coach can't find the spine that works, you're in trouble, and you are going to get criticised.
Is that an issue that he doesn't have the players that have currently got the skill set to make the spine work? I'm just asking that because...
Possibly, but...
Because he's a pivot. I'll let you come back again. Not a half-back, but a full-back. But he's got one of the best in Lee Breers alongside him. If them two together cannot make it work, I'm just asking, is it because, you know, what they've got at the disposal is just not going to gel? Nobody could make it
Tristan
work.
Saylor was signed by, you know, in a regime where Paul Wellens was in charge.
Yes.
And Lee Breers knew him from Brisbane. And Lee Breers will no doubt have had a say in that signing.
Yeah.
You know, that you can't...
No, I agree. I'm just throwing it out there and playing devil's advocate of, you know, with them there, if, you know, surely they can make it work. If they can't, does that mean it doesn't work?
The problem we've got is this, and this is where the criticism comes from me. When they signed Saylor, everyone went, well, how does that work? Because you've got Wellsby, who's arguably the best one of the best fullbacks in the comp. You'd say alongside Jay Field most probably. And you've got Tristan Saylor, who has largely played fullback. How does that work? And the answer has proven to be today it doesn't work. When you end up with Tristan Saylor on the wing, and Wellens even admitted that wasn't the plan. It's very, very clear they just don't know the solution at the minute.
Well, we mentioned it over the weekend, didn't we? That Ian Watson had the same problem at Huddersfield.
Yeah,
he didn't know his best spine, and it didn't work
Connor
out for
was
him.
in and out of the side.
Yeah, but to be up there competing week in, week out, you need the same spine. You need that consistency, don't you?
And it's not been an injury thing. It's he just can't figure out the best way forward.
Which Wigan had as well when they signed Field and French, and obviously French played on the wing. I think Field had a stint on the wing.
Field was on the wing,
They just didn't quite know yet, but they found obviously that winning combination that obviously did what they did last year and across the last few years. But yeah, they just don't know that combination just yet, do they?
No, they don't. And there's time yet, but it's hard to see.
There is time, but we're 10 weeks into a season.
It's hard to see them finding an answer that's going to dramatically improve things where they can be competing. I don't see St Helens suddenly becoming a team that threaten to win a comp this year.
Well, they've got 2 weeks, like 7 other sides than them. They've got a week off this week because of the Challenge Cup.
I don't think Paul Wellens will. I know there's been a lot of rumours, Smailes, just on this about Paul Wellens being moved on immediately. I don't get the impression that's happening.
No, I'd be
amazed if he's there next year.
I'm not as close to it or even remotely close to it at all. But looking from the outside in, I would say, well, he at least stays till the end of the year, surely. And then
he got a 1-year contract extension at the end of the year, which sort of was an indicator of, well, you've got another year to prove yourself. You would say that he's not done enough right now to earn a contract extension because things haven't got better, have they? If we're honest.
No.
I don't think there's any. I don't think at the minute he'll be leaving immediately.
We could be set. What you're saying there for an interesting end to the year. We could. Let's wait and see what happens. But in theory, be looking for new coaches certainly for Leeds and for St Helens.
Yeah.
Brings me on.
At a minimum.
Sorry?
At a minimum. Yeah.
At a minimum. And I was going to say it brings me on being the segue master that I am into could they be looking for one certainly in the next couple of years at Warrington Wolves with Mr. Burgess kind of showing a bit of leg to the NRL last week. He was kind of having a bit of a flirt and saying, hey, come look what I've got over here with the Perth job, which is starting to, attract interest there for 2027.
Yeah.
I think so we're talking another year and a half. Certainly they're going to want an appointment way before then because they need to build a squad and put things in place. But he had a little flirtation with it, did Sam, didn't he? Which I think caught a few by surprise, especially when he ain't been great recently and you start, putting your hand up.
Yeah, and there's certainly be probably a bit more pressure over there. I think from reports down under, Brad Arthur remains the number one candidate for that job. I think George Williams said on the Bench podcast that he himself doesn't see Sam Burgess going there to be head coach, but I think he does see. I think we do see that Sam Burgess will return to the NRL at some point in some sort of coaching capacity, whether it be head coach or assistant coach to then find a head coaching role. I think that will come in the next few years.
I won't surprise in the slightest.
No.
He signed a contract extension until the end of 2026. He's not been secretive about his desire to go back to Australia and coach in the NRL. He'll have done 3 years by then. I wasn't surprised in the slightest that he threw his hat in the ring. On Brad Arthur, I think Peter Parr, who a lot of people won't know over here, Newcastle director, I think he's got a big say in what happens with Brad Arthur. He's been linked with a role at the Bears.
Yes.
And I'm told he's a big admirer of Brad Arthur. So it wouldn't shock me if he stays at Newcastle if Brad Arthur was to get that job next year, if I'm honest. Because Adam O'Brien's off contract at the end of the year. It's not really going to plan for him at the Knights at all. The only complication there is that O'Brien and Brad Arthur are very good friends. But it seems to me Peter Parr is a moving part in this, who's a very big fan of Brad Arthur.
See, I wouldn't be surprised if Perth was the right fit for Burgess because, and we discussed this a little bit when we were in Newcastle, they need a big marquee, if you will, signing to be head coach. trying to make waves, entering the competition. They want to get that media attention. They want to get that focus of. It's a long way, Perth to Sydney. I mean, it's like I don't know how far it is in miles, but it's probably like going from London to Moscow or something like that. It's a long journey. They're almost in another continent out there. This, it's a lot further than going to Perpignan. I think they need to keep the attention on that club, even though there is going to be a lot of attention because it's first year, and a big marquee name does that, and there isn't that many more bigger than Sam Burgess, especially for the Australians as well, where his stock is still very, very high for what he did as a player. I just think it fits.
Which is exactly what the Dolphins did with Wayne Bennett.
Yeah.
The veteran head coach.
Completely.
Yeah,
Getting in, get the media in. Then that attracts some players. Players want to go play for Wayne Bennett, and you see that wherever he goes, players want to go play for him. Sam Burgess might have the same. He goes over to the NRL, players want to play for Sam Burgess, so then they'll sign with that team, and there could be big name players that want to play for Sam Burgess.
And on that, and let's not get too far ahead because this is 2027 season, but they will start that recruitment cycle very soon for that new club. It's not a new club, but for the club entering the competition. Should we be worried that we've now got an extra player in the market for that wants, because them Super League players are going to be a lot cheaper than a lot of them NRL players.
Terrified, Smailes.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that if Brad Arthur goes, you've got a guy who's cast his eye over Super League for 2 seasons.
Yeah, or Burgess as well.
Or Bird.
Yeah.
Very worrying.
Yeah.
Without saying too much, it's worrying.
Yeah. Well, no doubt we'll revisit that in the weeks to come. Let's talk about a big story, which it's a bit strange. Obviously, we're recording this on, to peel back the curtain a little bit, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon because of the bank holiday yesterday. And we haven't actually put this story out yet, but by the time most people see this, we will have. At least I hope we will have if Matt pulls his finger out. But 2026, there's every chance that we'll see 2 World Club challenges played next season.
Quite possible.
Explain why.
A proposal's been put forward to the NRL from organisers over here, Rugby League Commercial, Super League, for the 2027 World Club challenges it would be, the winners of the 2026 season, to be played very soon after the grand finals of both competitions and it tie in with a World Cup.
Which I love because we're trying to, you've got your 2 grand final winners, the idea being you play to see who's the best. But the squads can be so different by the time you get round to playing it at the end of February, start of March, with different players, some who have gone, some have come in. So I think having it the week after, or worst case scenario, 2 weeks after the grand final, I think that's perfect.
I don't hate it.
The NRL grand final always finishes before the Super League one. They can fly over. There's no reason why you can't have Super League grand final on Saturday.
I think Super League would fly over there.
Yeah, with it being
with the World Cup being in Australia.
Makes sense, with the World Cup.
There's not much more to add at the minute. It's a proposal, but I like the idea. I think, one of the gripes has always been, as you said, people want it straight after. And this is an opportunity to do it where it all fits in. So let's see. You've got to work out the logistics of the scheduling with the World Cup. Can you get a game in between Grand Final, Super League Grand Final and World Cup? We know last World Cup there was a very small gap between the two.
Plus, teams looking to play international friendlies before the World Cup in preparation. That would take a week or 2.
You have RLPA to think about, who always have a say in these things. So there's a lot to get through. But I like the idea. I think it's a good idea.
We can all agree on that the World Club Challenge needs to be cemented in the calendar, can't we? That needs to 100%. Be every year without fail. That there's no argument over that. I'd struggle a little bit with this post grand final. I don't know how players. I mean, you might have more insight on this. How players would react to that, because you've got to build yourself up so much for the grand final. You're playing at Old Trafford, then you've got to potentially fly. Either team have got to fly to Australia.
You know what? Footballers do it. When Man United won the treble and they won the FA Cup final after the week after winning the Premier League, and then go a few days later and win the Champions League, that's just a professional mindset. And that's what you need to be the best. And
I'm not saying players won't want to buy into it. I would just be interested in their say, which goes back to Alex Wellens' piece the other week about them having a say, their stakeholders. I wonder if they're getting any say in this sort of any conversations, if it advances. I think you say it's still early days.
Exciting though, exciting. let's rattle through a few more before we run out of time. The quarter meeting, which we discussed last week when it was a much better podcast with just me and you on, without Josh interrupting. And we were saying, look, this could happen, that could happen in salary cap quarter. Ultimately,
nothing happened.
I think
there will be a resolution by the end of the month. The RFL have been asked to go back and come.
But as we stand at the minute, there's nothing to report with anyone.
No.
Let's talk about Luke Carey,
I'm looking forward to this one.
Who you were trying to track down for an interview after he played at Magic. He didn't want to speak to any press.
He said he can't speak. He found a time and a place to speak before, didn't he? When he
said he
slagged
can't
off,
speak, but
I thought it was really
Warrington did say that he was up to speaking. In fact,
Catalans. Yeah. Steve McNamara said at the end of his...
Yeah, Steve McNamara said,
he'll be
go find him.
more than happy to speak to you, and he wouldn't speak.
Yeah.
I thought that was poor. I've just
quickly remind everybody what he said.
He
basically said Super League's rubbish.
He basically said things aren't very good over here.
Yeah.
Apparently, he wanted to clarify that he didn't mean the standard of the competition, but it didn't come across that in the quotes. But I just think he should have, when given, there were 4 journalists waiting to speak to him, and he said he can't do it. I think he should have done.
Yeah, it was an opportunity to clarify.
I think it actually makes him look worse when he won't speak to the press over here.
Yeah.
So he'd happily say it to the Aussies, but won't say it to us. I thought that was poor. I thought it was poor from a guy that I know is very articulate. I spoke to the World Cup, and he came across as a genuinely good fella, and I'm sure he is. But I don't think you can really misconstrue his words, can you? They were pretty damning. So
I think what we can say, I don't think we're giving any secrets away, is he did seek Rodri Jones from the IFL, and them two had a conversation about it. We're not privy to exactly what was said in that conversation, but that was instigated by Carey, who wanted to speak to Rodri and explain why he said what he said, basically. One last one. Castleford Tigers, few changes. Martin Jepson is now majority shareholder.
Yes.
Taking control of the club. Good thing for Castleford Tigers, definitely. What's that change moving forward in the immediacy for them?
I think in the immediacy, not much, but probably long term, you'll see the implication that they can move forward, probably push forward with investment. The stadium stuff doesn't really change. They're waiting for some money to drop or some changes there. We've done a piece with Martin Jepson that we'll put out later in the week. I think just the assurance that he's there and he's taking over now is there is the main thing. It's good news.
He's a boyhood fan, isn't he? With who will have no doubt high ambitions for his club.
He does have high ambitions,
which is what every Castleford fan will want.
Yeah,
and I think he teased that more board changes could happen as well. So maybe look to bring in a little bit of experience as well to help back him and build Castleford Tigers.
And I don't want to be disrespectful to the Challenge Cup, and I don't want everyone to think that we don't care about it because we do, obviously. But we're not going to do a predictions episode this week just because there's only 2 games to go at. So let's just quickly talk Challenge Cup very quickly because time's against us. But Hulkinson Rovers against Carland Dragons in York on Saturday. Dragons frustrated, disappointed after Magic. They've stayed over here. They're training over here this week. They've not gone back home. They're desperate to get there. Hulk are rested. Well, they didn't really rest because one of them was ahead.
Rested Jared Waria Hargreaves.
Yeah.
I think they could have played Tom Davis if they wanted. They really rested JWH.
Yeah.
Hulk will win.
Hulk will win that one.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I'm telling everyone at Magic, I think they're going to win the full thing this year, so I've got to go with them. Second game, Warrington against Lee. Lee are desperate. I could sense from Lammy and from everybody actually at Lee at Magic Weekend, they're really, really desperate to get their hands on this trophy. Again, 2 years later, that's not to say Warrington aren't desperate either. But Lee is certainly the ones that are in better form. How do we see this one?
Lee.
Yeah, both sides hit with injuries, aren't they? But I see Lee as well. And I think I'm going to put this out. I think at the start of the year, I know it's look at the draw, but I think I did say Hulk Lee Challenge Cup final. So I just want to put that out there.
Did you? Where did you say that?
I think I said it on our pre-season predictions piece, or I said it in the All Out Rugby League magazine. I did say
We'll
it.
double check that. Just to actually
Funny
find
when
out.
it's Catalan's Warrington.
Yeah. Well, he did also say Catalan with the team to watch out for this season. So anyway, we will be back with a second episode later this week, but it'll be a transfer special. We've got a few tasty transfers to get stuck into. So look out for that one later in the week. On behalf of myself and Josh, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you later in the week.
And above all else, enjoy rugby league. Take care.